world will wander after the beast. It will be indoctrinated to have the mindset that he wants you to have. Now, I want to know where this is going to lead. And how do you carry on with this? I just want to do a few more pointers here. The list of actors employed by these papal criminals, so says Vatican assassins. This man, of course, has a mouth that is very loose, if I may say, so excuse his language, but what he says in a rather harsh way is actually correct. The list of actors employed by these papal criminals is most impressive. Hollywood is merely Jesuit theater, nothing more. Jews involved are papal court Jews worshipping their god Mammon, etc. And it's for the military company of Jesus. Now, if you write something in that fashion and you write it so harshly, maybe people will say, that suits them too, they don't mind. I wouldn't be surprised if some of them are authors of some of these thoughts. Now, Knight of Malta, Jack Valenti, was head of Motion Picture Association of America. If you want to know who controls the mega studios, in 2004, Mr. Saxon was inducted as a Knight of Malta. He owned all of these major companies and, well, also Hollywood studios. Is it really the Jews who control this place? There's an abundance of theatrical performances. We read in a good source now. You see, that's the one mindset. Let's achieve our aims through theater, through great performances that bypass the cognitive. Now let's see what God's way would be, the spirit of prophecy. There's an abundance of theatrical performances in our world, but in its highest order, it is without God. That's a fascinating statement. We need to now point the soul to the uplifted Savior. Deceptions, impositions, and every evil worker in the world. Satan, the wily foe in angels' garments, is working to deceive and destroy. The object of the death of Christ was to declare his righteousness, and no man, woman, or child can do this in their own strength or by their own words. So here's a false righteousness portrayed in these movies. Here's another quote from Adventist Home. Through the drama, he has worked for ages to excite passion and glorify vice. The opera, with its fascinating display and bewildering music, the masquerade, the dance, the card table, Satan employs to break down the barriers of principle and open the door to sensual indulgence. So there's two ways of reaching minds, one through the theatrical and one through the word. Shows and theaters. Satan's ruling passion is to pervert the intellect and to cause men to long for shows and theatrical performances. The experience and character of all who engage in this work will be in accordance with the food given the mind. The Lord has given evidence of his love to the world. There was no falsity, no acting in what he did. This is interesting. So we have two contrasting mindsets. Which one do you think will be the more popular in this world? Well, hands down. Now, let's get a little bit closer to very modern little children's stories and others and find out what the real message is and how the mind must be indoctrinated, and then eventually, where will it lead to? Because this is what I'm very passionate about. Now, in ancient Greece, the god Apollo and Artemis, or Pan and Diana in the other nomenclature, were very, very prominent deities. Even mentioned in the Bible is Diana of the Ephesians. And she's, of course, the goddess of fertility, and she's also the consort of the god Pan. Now, Pan has two sides to him. He has the goat side, the evil side, where he plays the pan flute, and he's the god of sexuality. He roars through the forests, causing panic. That's where the word panic comes from. Pan, chaos. He rapes, he pillages, he's violent. And then he has a good side, which is the good shepherd side, where he carries the the sheep, and he is the good shepherd. And this is a very fascinating interplay of good and evil, because Satan has a yin-yang philosophy. Everybody has both sides of the coin, whereas God says, no, you don't have to be evil. You can be only good. You don't have to be balanced by evil in order to make good prominent. So here is the god Pan in his evil form with his pan flute. But he doesn't always have to be shown with his horns and his goat form. Now if we go to animated movies, like you will find in Disney's Peter Pan, then who are the writers and the organizations? We all know that Walt Disney was a 33-degree Freemason. He was steeped in Medici learning. The Jesuits were behind him, obviously, because they are the harborers of Medici learning. They are the ones who control it in the world. They are the experts in the occult art and in Gnosticism and Kabbalism. Now in this movie there are a number of interesting characters. Peter Pan, Wendy, John and Michael Darling, and the mother, who is of course called Mary. It's obvious. And who is Peter Pan and who is Wendy? Well, if Peter Pan, it's an interesting Kabbalistic name as well, because Pan, the god of evil, has a consort who is Diana, but he also has a representative on this earth who is called Peter, if you get my drift. And in that theology there is a female entity who is the mediator and the mediatrix, and that is Mary. So if you analyze the names, you have Peter Pan, you have Wendy, and you have John, and you have Michael. Now the name John always in the occult world becomes an acronym for something else. We'll discuss this a little bit. Just to show you a little bit more of another side of Peter Pan, he always wears this little hat with a feather in it. Now, it's actually a replica, and well, we don't have to go into all the details. Just remember, Peter Pan has that little hat on his head, and he has funny ears, and obviously he's alien. He's not from this dimension. And there are the three little children, John, Wendy, and Michael. Now, let's have a look at the personalities. This you can find on any web page. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to find this. John is shown to be extremely sophisticated despite his age. He often speaks in a sophisticated way, which his younger brother, Michael, usually mimics and repeats, although simplistically, in a stupid way, in other words. For example, John, oh, I should like very much to cross swords with some real buccaneers. Michael, yeah, and fight pirates too. Obviously, it's one and the same thing. The one is just sophisticated, the other one is not sophisticated. Now let me take you to heaven. In occult thinking, who's the older brother in heaven? Satan. Who's the younger stupid brother in heaven? Jesus. What's his other name? Michael. Okay. Now it's also interesting that this younger brother shows interest in piracy, which may explain why he plays the part of Captain Hook. Now is Captain Hook the good guy or the bad guy? He's the bad guy. He's the evil one. And Michael always plays the part of the evil one. And they cross swords, and they're fighting. Now these are the swords with which they fight, and it's all made to appear very congenial and interesting and funny, and kids love it, and adults love it too. But can you see that the sword can also double for a cross? So this is a battle for your soul. Now, how far will this eventually go, and what do the acronyms actually mean? Now let's just make sure. I've shown this in an old one of mine, but I'll dig it up again for the purpose of this lecture. Here is a famous monastery cathedral in Europe where the great politicians of the world meet to make decisions for the New World Order. So when they visit there, This is where they will stay, and this is where they will deliberate. Now, in the garden, I found this statue, which they have titled David. And David is being depicted there as the good shepherd, but in his hand he has a pan flute. And David never played the pan flute, he played the lyre. The harp, at least. The harp. So, this is not David. This is the god Pan. And so I realized when I saw this statue, this is the god Pan in his good shepherd form. Now, whenever you show the yin, you must also show the yang. So where in the cathedral will I find his other form, his evil form, to balance him out and make the esoteric Kabbalistic place complete? So I went looking for it, and I searched high and low until I eventually found it. And I found many other things on the relief of the building, and there it is. There he is. You see him? There's the god Pan in his evil form as the goat-footed god. So this is the god Pan. This is the one who they worship. But Pan has a representative on this planet. And that representative also has a general. And that is, according to the Protestant Reformation, none other than the papacy, whom they identified as Antichrist. So let's go to the Pope and see what he wears and how he displays it. Now, Pope Francis has decided that he was going to dispense with the golden cross, and he kept the silver cross, to which he was accustomed, as his papal cross. And it has on it, and you can see it over there, the emblem of the Good Shepherd. Now the question is, because there are the sheep behind it, and there's Juno the dove, which is pagan form of the deity Juno, and is not a symbol of the Holy Spirit. The question then is this Good Shepherd representing Jesus, or is it representing the god Pan? And Pan, of course, is Satan. That's what it is. Now you will see that he has his arms crossed, like this. Now Jesus is never depicted with his arms crossed like this, but the god Osiris is always depicted with his arms crossed. And as we have seen, the cross is a symbol of victory and a new order which will be brought in by the coming Messiah, which is of course the worship of Lucifer, which precedes the coming of Christ. So this god here, by the very nature, is the god Pan. But am I now on speculative ground? So let's go to his predecessor and retired current Pope, who happens to be Pope Benedict. And there he is. And this is his coronation. And he's receiving a mitre. And on his mitre, there is a deity displayed. Now I've tried to increase the size, but the quality is not very good. Of course he has the broken cross there with him, symbol of the broken cross, the bent cross, symbol of victory over Christ, of Lucifer, with an emaciated Jesus hanging there. But this deity over here is playing an instrument, and if you look very carefully, you might recognize that it is the pan flute. So he has the god Pan right on his head. He's the representative of Satan on this planet. That is what the symbolism says. Whether we like it or not, that might sound incredibly harsh, and I apologize for saying it as bluntly. Now let's go back to another movie which is used as an acronym. They can take snippets of history and turn it around to allegorize their existence. Robin Hood and Little John, the famous Sherwood Forest couple, and the merry robbers who took from the rich and gave to the poor. Now, who is more concerned about the poor today than anyone else on this planet? Isn't it the Pope? He's constantly saying we must take from the rich and give to the poor. He's the ultimate Robin Hood on this planet. Now, in this story, it's even in the form of a statue in England. So they've glorified this story. Now, it has an ancient origin, but it has been allegorized by them to meet their needs. Now, In the animated Walt Disney one, this is John. Again, you have a John, who is the sophisticated one, the clever one, the one who wields the sword. Now, in the previous John that we had, Peter Pan and Mary and John, he can also be an acronym. The one who wields the sword, will it be the white pope or the black pope? It'll be the black pope, right? Now, let's go to this story. Here we have Little John, and there you have Robin Hood in an animated form. But I want to show you the hat that they're wearing. And I want to remind you of Peter Pan, that also has the hat with a feather. So it's the same symbolism that they are using. Now in the story, Robin Hood has his band of merry men in the forest, and he's fighting against the evil lords that control England. Now England, of course, always was a renegade papal state and had to be constantly subdued. So the evil ones are the ones who run England, and the good ones are the ones who will take care of the needs of the poor, which the others never did. So again, good becomes what? Evil, and evil becomes good. Now in the story, one day he meets Little John, and he says, "What are you doing here?" And they start fighting, and they battle on a log. Eventually, Little John actually wins the battle and smacks Robin Hood so that he falls into the water. And they all laugh and make friends, and he takes him into his band. And Robin Hood actually tells him that you are greater and stronger and better in battle than me. You lead the people. But Little John declines and says, no, 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 you lead the people. But when Robin Hood gets captured, the one who takes over the leadership is Little John. So in the acronym, who is who? This will be the leader, the front leader, and this will be the power behind the front leader. So this becomes the papacy, and this becomes the black papacy. So it's the white pope and the black pope. And let's see how this unfolds. Now his name is John. Whose name is John? All of them are John, right? All of them are John. John is an acronym. Now the John that they're actually referring to is mostly John the Baptist. And we'll see why in a moment. News, UK, Jihadi John. Extremists not radicalized by MI5. So there are rumors that MI5 actually radicalized the people that they're fighting now. Well, if you go back into history, it's very fascinating that all the so-called enemies were trained and received not only their training but their weapons from the very ones who became their super enemies in the end. The Mossad trained many of the jihadists and the terrorist groups that plague the world today, Al-Qaeda and all of these. So these are all groups that have been set up. Now, this mass murderer, or this brutal murderer who always wears in black, has got the acronym Jihadi John. Okay, but that's not his real name. His real name is Muhammad Emwazi, which has nothing to do with John. And then, all over the news, they plastered the image of Jihadi John beheading his victims, in this case, Foley. Now, question. Is this real? Or is this what they want you to believe? Now, all you have to do is go to the web pages and have a look at people who are in the know, in the techno world, and there are literally hordes of web pages which will tell you that this is probably one of the worst Hollywood stunt productions that you can imagine, with analysis and all of this. I don't want to get into too much of a detail, but there are hundreds of skeptics out there who say, this never happened, this is not real. So I wanted to know the various actors, who are they and what happened. Now, according to USA Today, James Foley was educated at the Catholic Jesuit College in Milwaukee. So this is Jesuit involvement again. And if you start reading about the jihadists, you will see Jesuits involved. Jesuits priests disappearing, not reappearing. Jesuits everywhere along the line. Is it possible that they are actually the masterminds training? How does the master strategist work behind the scenes? Doesn't he create the enemies? Doesn't he pull the strings behind the scenes? Doesn't he achieve his objective through Hegelian dialectic? Doesn't he create the enemy which unites humanity? These are questions which I wish to raise. Now, all of these, of course, if they are trained in Jesuit colleges, are also trained in theatrics. And if we have a look at just the political scene and the great leaders of the world, John Paul II, wasn't he a known actor? His counterpart on the other side of the waters was Ronald Reagan. Wasn't he a known actor? Yes, the governor of California, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Is he not a trained actor? So there's a lot of theatrics involved. And whether this ever happened or whether it didn't happen, the world has to be shocked by the beheading. Beheading is probably one of the worst things. Now, if I go to Wikipedia, Jihadi John is also called John the Beetle. Now, the Beetle, John Lennon, was a known Luciferian. And he was controlled by the Jesuits directly. The Beetle group was controlled by the Jesuits. And he said, I sold my soul to Satan. And he's also called Jailer John. Now John is appearing just a little bit too frequently for my liking. And there are pseudonyms associated with a member of Islamic State of Iraq, ISIL, ISIS, and they behead various people. All right, so you have all of these acronyms. Now let's just go a little bit further into this. The Jesuits, Ebola, and beheadings, trying to get the New World Order going. Now, I'm not interested in the quality of this web page. Whether it's a good web page or a bad web page is irrelevant at this point, because people will take it anyway. But what is true, that black magic Freemasonry has the symbol for the degrees 9 to 11, which depict a decapitated head by a short sword. Let me tell you a little secret. Why would they use the symbol of a beheaded individual? And why is the name John always associated with these organizations? Because John the Baptist is the mega saint of many of the esoteric occult movements. And I'll give you some details as to this. Here is the UK column. So for instance, June the 24th, John the Baptist's Day, was appointed a Masonic holiday, on which the members were to assemble, perform certain rites, and partake of a common meal. Jews and Freemasons in Europe, etc., Harvard Press, etc. So now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of the matter. The Bunch of Grapes Tavern mentioned in the Poe chapter was called the St. John's Lodge No. 1. Satanist Aleister Crowley, a 33-degree Freemason who influenced the Beatles tremendously, by the way, sometimes used the alias John St. John. So when you attach an alias like John, then it is a signal that there is an occult connection. But none of the usage has anything to do with piety. Aleister Crowley was one of the most evil men on the planet, with the most evil rituals that you can imagine, which should never be spoken of in good places. So in actuality, it is a vicious mockery. What is memorialized is the manner of St. John's death. It is a constant source of celebration and a constant reminder to anti-Masons of what can happen to them. but even deeper, because now they're just thinking on a Masonic level. Let's go one deeper on a Jesuitical level. It is a constant reminder of the victory of Satan over Jesus Christ. We saw it in the movie, The Passion of the Christ, where they reverse the issues. So when they behead John the Baptist, it is a symbol of the victory of Lucifer against the followers of Jesus Christ. They're celebrating the beheading. They're not celebrating the saint. Are you with me?